next, here is STTR Showcase, Universities That Enable Success panel.
Hello, good morning. We are ready to kick off our welcome, and we're ready to kick off our session with our university partners. Again, my name is Anissa Lumpkin. Welcome back to our event this afternoon. So thank you for joining us. First, I'd like to welcome Dr. Damon Mateo from Texas A&M University System, which includes 4 offices that track the ongoing research and development of new and exciting technologies in agriculture, engineering, transportation, and all other university health sciences. Next, we have Martin Klickner, PhD from MBA, is the entrepreneur in residence at University of California, Riverside Office of Technology Partnership, which develops alliances with business community and fosters an ecosystem for innovation in the region. And then finally, we have Todd Struthers, Senior Technology Consultant at the Wisconsin Center for Technology Commercialization, assists small technology-based companies, request for SBIR and SITR funding. So welcome, gentlemen. So glad to have you here. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Happy to be here, likewise.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So, to begin, just tell us a little bit about your organization, and we'll go ahead and start with you, Todd.
Yeah, sure. So I am with the Center for Technology Commercialization, which is embedded within the UW systems here in Wisconsin. We work with pretty much anyone in the state who has some kind of technology that they're looking to commercialize. And we'll help them in any way, but a lot of what I do assists them in the SBIR or SITR process. We work with university people, so it's not unusual for professors to have some technology that they want to spin out. But we also work, and actually most of our clients are not directly associated with the university. They could be people who have a company already established, or somebody who has some kind of idea and will be looking to have establish a company. And we have all sorts of programs in place to help them negotiate through the process of putting together a good grant or a contract. And then we also have our own grants available that are matching grants for those companies who do have a SBIR or a SITR in place.
Thank you. That sounds very exciting, and what a benefit to the partners that you have.
I'm sorry?
So, no, I said that sounds really exciting, and what a benefit to the partnerships that you have.
Yeah, we're very happy with it, and everyone in the state seems to be very pleased with what we do. So we're really excited about how this operates. It does a great job.
That's good. So I was born and raised in Madison, Wisconsin, so I'm glad to see that you're taking care of.
Come on back.
I don't know if I can get through the snow, but I don't know. So, Martin, could you go ahead and tell us about your organization? Happy to have you here.
Yeah, happy to be here as well, Anissa. And yeah, I can relate about your comment with the snow. I'm a former Minnesota boy, but now having been in San Diego for such a long time, I don't think I can go back there anymore. That includes Madison. Although having said that, Todd, we actually do have a project on Alzheimer's, a team down here in San Diego, where we are collaborating with UW-Madison and won both phase 1 and phase 2 with regard to that. So you've been a terrific partner for this particular team.
Yeah,
but Anissa, as you had indicated, I'm an entrepreneur in residence with the Office of Technology Partnerships, and we're a division of research and economic development. concentration on commercialization, corporate and strategic partnerships, innovation and entrepreneurship, and so forth. That's our mission. Our aim is develop, fund, validate, incubate, and commercialize ventures. So I could be with a particular venture for many years, all the way from early stage seed funding throughout the completion of the exit strategy and liquidity event. So it could be several years. And like what Todd had mentioned, we have a myriad of programs as well. We have an incubator, we've got an accelerator, we've got a venture fund, the Highlander Venture Capital Fund. We have a second venture capital fund focusing on sustainability and are actually building a new innovation park surrounding the University of California campus. We've got an SBDC. I think I mentioned an incubator, an accelerator. We are a National Science Foundation I-Corps site. We engage extensively in international relationships with universities through the Organization of American States in Chile and soon Colombia, Panama, and in the not too distant future, Spain as well. Host a myriad also of conferences. Just completed the Southern California SBIR STTR conference, where we had 19 federal agencies, 7 panels focusing on corporate partnerships and related, and 635 attendees this year. So we continue to grow and probably will. I don't think it'll be too unrealistic that we'll probably have about 1,000 participants next year when we do it again. So lots of things going on. So that's just a little bit of an overview on what we do in NISA.
Thank you, Damon, or thank you, Martin. So,
Yeah, no worries.
so
we both look alike, so I can see.
We do indeed. It's the glasses.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Yeah, we do all look up amazingly similar here. I don't know if that's a problem or not.
We're glad to have you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anissa. Yep.
Hey, so Damon, could you go ahead and tell us about your organization? Tell us about yourself and your organization and what you're doing down in Texas, because I know they do everything big in Texas, right?
Yeah, everything's big in Texas. And I'm actually new to Texas. I'm from Silicon Valley. Well, lived overseas for quite a while, but I'm actually from Silicon Valley. So I'm a transplant. I've only been here about a year. But one of the things that drew me to Texas A&M is the fact that it's extraordinarily entrepreneurial in its nature. And part of the good news is that we have north of 70,000 students and 17 different and disparate colleges and universities, which in fact is also the bad news. We have 17 different and disparate universities, which suggests unique requirements for technology maturation and commercialization for each of those. So part of my role, I'm at the system level, the overarching across all 17 organizations, is to identify sort of commercial innovation strategies and entrepreneurial and venture strategies to help commercially express all the really fantastic technologies that are coming to light here at Texas A&M University. And like some of the other panelists, we have an I-Corps, we're a national I-Corps site. We have in our School of Business, we have an entrepreneurial program. We have a number of different conferences focused in and around technology and its commercial expression in the marketplace. We've actually recently invested, in effect, have acquired what amounts to an antique airport purchased from the military, and we're outfitting that to be sort of a technology proving ground, technology maturation, integration proving ground. So we have this sort of tabula rasa palette from which to build all of these phenomenal different technology creation, venture, and commercialization platforms. So it's a really exciting place, and I'm glad to be here. I'm still practicing my howdy, but I'm sure in a year or two I'll get it.
Yeah, it's always exciting to be there and be immersed in the innovation and the entrepreneurship and culture that you all are immersed in, and just to see the success stories that come out of that. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, since I have you here, is when you're out looking for individuals to help, for you to help and support and partner with, beyond that research and into application. So what kind of businesses are you looking to for? What kind of businesses come to look for your support? Let's see. Martin, did you want to jump in there?
Sure. Well, our primary focus is on the researchers at the University of California. And closely behind our entrepreneurs, early startups. They're not really companies yet, but they're startups throughout Southern California. So while our footprint will be in the Riverside, San Bernardino area, we stretch all the way up to Los Angeles and all the way down to San Diego. Sometimes we cross borders, and we do have clients sometimes out of state. The furthest one was the University of Alabama, so go figure. And likewise from Northern California, as far north as University of California, Merced, University of California, San Francisco, and so on. So lots of initiatives there, but our clientele, we're kind of like a ground zero for SBIR and STTR, and I guess that's part of our fault for making an effort to brand ourselves as that way. So universities, USC, Caltech, UCLA, UC San Diego, and the list goes on, UC Irvine, will frequently come to us for support on SBIR and STTR, but also with regard to support for securing venture capital funding, angel capital funding, foundational funding, and so forth as well.
Excellent, excellent. So are there any other businesses that different from what Martin stated that you see that you are look for your support, Damon?
I think Martin pretty much covered it. But in terms of, it's one thing for businesses to seek our support, and the other is how do we deal with them once they have sought our support. So, I approach this from sort of schizophrenically from the academic side, but also I come from the private sector. So I'm an investor myself. I did M&A on Wall Street, so I know the buy and sell side. So I know what companies have traction in the marketplace, how to position your company. So, typically when I look at a company, I look for all of the, at this point, it's a cliche, passion, drive, focus, all of those sorts of things. But in addition to that, the cultural, softer things like being open, receptive to new ideas, self-aware, which I know doesn't always translate to self-correcting. And that can be things like openness to partners, openness to teammates, openness to being connected to the marketplace. Because, for example, if you pick two of the top reasons that startups fail, it's, they've missed the market niche. They didn't connect with the marketplace in a meaningful way. Third most is the fact that their team competencies didn't map to their requirements. So when I'm looking at principals, I want to understand that they are open and receptive to building all of the requisite sensitivities and capabilities and competencies necessary to bridge from where they are to where they have to be. And part of looking at these companies is identifying where they have to be. And when I look at the companies proper or the business proposition, everybody who comes to me has a unicorn on steroids. When in fact, not all business. Yes, I know it's shocking to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not all business propositions are unicorns. Some of them are just good, solid workhorses, and there's nothing wrong with that. But frankly, some of them are just donkeys, and you're better off finding another ride if you're looking to get venture capital money. So it's those kinds of things that I look for in terms of a filter for picking companies to work with and how to work with them. The other thing I would add is a lot of companies come again with this sort of tunnel vision, head down, straightforward. What they need to be more conscious of, I think, is what their exit path is. What is their exit? And sometimes it can be multiple or a panoply of things that are in sight. But planning for that is extremely valuable. It can make a big difference between getting funded, getting acquired or not. Maybe it's a standalone proposition and it is an IPO. Or maybe, just to give an example, it's a technology where a medtech technology where often channel is king. So if you're not a GE or someone who's in that space, it's a non-starter. So strategic partnerships earlier or later, depending upon where the inflection point of advantage is something to contemplate. Or if it's a platform technology, don't plan for an IPO. Maybe you should be bolstering your IP portfolio so it's a licensing play into multiple verticals for manufacturing. So it's these kinds of things that I look for when I bring in companies or I invest in them myself, and use those as sort of guideposts because they're all path dependencies to success.
Absolutely, absolutely. Damon, thank you for that. Because that actually brings me into and Todd, feel free to add to that. But also I wanted to ask you, what kind of characteristics make them successful candidates for commercialization? I know, and Damon and Martin, you kind of touched on it, but have you seen some examples of what are those companies that really say, I know they're going to be successful in this commercial market?
Yeah, so I can jump in here too, and one of the, I guess, differences with us, even though we are part of the UW systems in the university, our goal really is to focus primarily on companies or people who are entrepreneurs. And if that person happens to be involved with the university, that's absolutely fine, but there's no requirement that they do have to be in order to take advantage of our services. One of the things that we do see, when we get a lot of people, and sometimes they're just people who have ideas and they just don't know where they want to go, all the way to companies that have been established. They've been around for several years. They may even have sales and they may even be profitable. Great. But they're just looking for assistance in getting these SIBRs or sitters, and when we're here to help them. Really, I think that the success that we see are in those companies that are able to set aside the science and research that they think is fabulous and look primarily at the market or the problem that they're trying to solve for their customers. And when we talk to our clients that are going through some of our programming, there is a real clear demarcation between those companies that are primarily run by a scientist who's looking to try to market their idea versus some company that has a business person who has expertise in business, and they are part of the team, and they're the ones that are going out and try to find funding and going out and looking at the market. So certainly the scientist person, the technical person can do that, but often it's they're really wrapped up in their science and they're just convinced that that their customers are going to buy it because it's fabulous for them. They like it, so why doesn't everybody else? But we do find that those companies that are most successful have a full-fledged team with a real strong commercial and business component to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Nisa, I'd like to underscore Todd, because I agree with him completely. And I was just thinking, Todd, when you were mentioning that I'd say at least 65%, if not north of the teams with which I work, I need to spend time on building or fortifying the team. And Todd is absolutely spot on. In my experience, is similar in that. Especially with regard to SBIRs and STTRs initially, or even the precursor ones, many of the founders outside of the university environment are not trained in research design methodologies, study approach, aims, measurable aims, and statistical analytics, and so forth. So that brings in an opportunity that we may need to fortify the team with these non-university ventures to partner with a not-for-profit, a university or a research lab, and so forth. And it doesn't necessarily need to be with the University of California. And I had mentioned earlier that an Alzheimer's initiative from a team outside of San Diego is actually working very closely with a lab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Likewise, for counterfeit technology, it seems that a lab at Michigan State University is the place to go for a collaboration there. Having said that, academics are not necessarily and most likely are not trained in commercialization. So I will need to bring on, or we will need to bring on additional skill sets, individuals, sometimes a CEO in residence, which is in addition to yours truly, who is an entrepreneur in residence, we have CEOs in residence as well, who in concert with me or without me will take the early role and responsibility for all matters of commercialization, including regulatory affairs, including if you're in the life sciences, coding and reimbursement, including all capital raises all the way, and then and staying with them to an appropriate transition, liquidity event or exit or out licensing, as I think Damon or Todd had mentioned as well. So bottom
Absolutely.
line is ultimately we may need to end up building the team. And then just to wrap this up, these teams also are on the podium a lot, giving their own presentations, and everyone has a template. But what I've discovered in deal reviews that I participate in frequently, that there really are essential 3 questions that they really are interested in hearing. And that is, number 1 is, what is your business model? Number 2, how did that business model come about? And what traction have you gained with that business model to date? We, in the good old days, used to think, just ask us, we'd tell you. We were among the smartest people in the world when it came to making investment decisions. But after initially the dot-com bubble burst and the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, I think we all now have to sneak up to the mirror every morning to brush our teeth and wash our face because we're looking at one of the dumbest people we've ever seen in our lives. So the way to do that is to get evidence-based traction to where then we can become a little bit more accommodating to our risk-averse nature now, and then whatever evidence-based traction that they don't have will help them get there the rest of the way.
Yeah, and I'll mention again too that the 3 questions that I always like to try to ask is, what problem are you solving, who are you solving it for, and the most important one, how do you know? How do you really know that the people you say you're solving a problem will actually want that solution?
I mean, that's important. That's key, right? That what is your value proposition? You know, who is your, at the end of the day, who is your real customer, and are you really meeting their needs? I know that's really strong with Air Force, and when we look at the partnerships that we have, it all comes down to the needs of our, what we call our warfighter, or our weapon systems and programs and platforms. So absolutely, that is the key.
And so, Anissa, to that end, that's why Damon and I and Todd are all involved in I-Corps as well, for discovery and validation, to get that evidence-based. Ultimately, it's doing the hypothesis, it's testing it with the informational interview questions, it's gaining lessons learned, developing insights, and ultimately deriving the value propositions, which will be the most impactful and motivational for the target customer to buy into the transformative innovation. So yeah, so that in itself is a program that we set great store by, all of us, by the way, and focus very heavily on.
I mean, that's key. That commercialization piece takes a great deal of education. And so, Martin, you brought up I-Corps, and can you tell us about I-Corps, and then are there other programs that are similar to I-Corps that are really good for educating our inventors and researchers out there?
Sure. And although I'm a preaching disciple of I-Corps, and in fact, I was trained back in 2015, exactly the same time with all of Damon's colleagues at Texas A&M. With the Texas node, UT Austin and Rice, right, and Texas A&M and a few others and so forth, which was terrific. But this, as most of you probably already know, this came out of Stanford University and UC Berkeley, Steve Blank. and colleagues. And I think it was back in 2012 that the National Science Foundation took it on, and ultimately the NIH, of which I've been extensively involved, and DoD to some extent as well. And the bottom line here is that the I-Corps is intended to improve our chances, our team's chances for success by going through a pretty intensive program of discovery and validation. And it follows in accordance with the scientific method of hypothesis, as I had mentioned, performing experiments, which means designing your informational interview questions, hypothesizing a business model canvas, 9 components, 9 elements, and testing every one of them extensively. The good news is that for anyone who joins a national cohort, you actually get funded a grant, $55,000. And a wink and a nod to everybody here, most likely the best chances of you securing your initial customers, even if it's pilot commercialization, comes through that program. Can't underscore enough how important it is, and it provides investors ultimately, and by the way, decision makers, reviewers with the agencies for SBIR and STTR, it provides them with the opportunity to manage their risk averse needs because I-Corps provides demonstrative, definitive evidence of having to met with the target customer in order to develop the value propositions that they want, rather than the value propositions that we think in isolation might be the ones that would win the day. And Damon and Todd, you can probably add a bunch to that as well.
Yeah, Damon, do you have ways to look at or get or ways to look at network collaborators, how to establish that network and build that STTR portfolio towards those commercialization efforts?
I do. One thing I would like to add, though, on the heels of the conversation about education is, one of the things certainly that's in my sights is I-Corps is great. These entrepreneurial boot camps are great, et cetera, et cetera. But it's one thing to get an education that you can bring to an entrepreneurial environment that will help you succeed. It's another thing, and I think it's a better thing, to bring the entrepreneurial environment to the education proper, integrating entrepreneurial thinking, entrepreneurial concepts into the education proper. So if you're an engineer or a physicist, you don't have your head down in the books for 5 years, 6 years, lift it up and then try and graft on top of that an I-Corps experience. Or, I went to the B School's entrepreneurial program for 3 days. And so for me, I'm sorry, I'll get off my soapbox in a second. Integrating that entrepreneurial spirit and mentality into the education proper, as opposed to pretending we can graft it on later, I think that's really the key. The people I have seen succeed most are the kinds of people who've gotten that education, have those kinds of sensitivities.
So do you have do you guys have a venture or entrepreneurial type of education programs at your universities or at your systems so for those universities spin out entrepreneurship, is that those programs available at your institutions?
Yeah, sure. So in Wisconsin, we do have an I-Corps site in Milwaukee that we are part of, or we assist in. So I've been mentors and been involved with the I-Corps site in Milwaukee several times. And then also just independently with our clients, I've been the business mentor on a couple of our clients in the national program. But for our programs here in the CTC, we do have a matching grant, like I mentioned earlier, that requires the winners of a phase 1 SBIR to go through our program, which is based on the national I-Corps program, and we primarily do customer discovery. It's a multi-month program where we insist that they put together a business model canvas to determine what their business hypotheses are, And then we have them go out and find people to talk to, not only just customers or customer segments, but also people involved in regulatory issues or partners or whoever they need to be involved. So this is one of the programs we have, and we certainly I'm involved in the training of it. We do send our clients through there with the goal that they're able to prepare a very strong winning phase 2 SBIR with a commercialization plan. It does seem to be fairly successful. I think recently, some of the data that I think we've gotten is people that go through our phase 1 lean startup class have something in the neighborhood of 70 or maybe even 80% success rate in getting a phase 2 funded.
And I was just going to follow up on both Todd's and Damon's comments. I couldn't agree more with what Damon had indicated, and the best experience is doing it. And as I think I'd mentioned earlier, we assign an EIR and or a CIR, CEO in residence, to them, so they are actually going through the actual process. So it's not just simply an arm's length education. So I don't want anyone to misconstrue what we're talking about here, is that they are actually commercializing a transformative innovation to the best of their ability. To that end, however, we do have a lot of programs. We've got the SBIR STTR Support Center. I'd mentioned our initial venture fund, and we've got a second venture fund. We like Todd, and I'm certainly Damon, you've got the same thing. We've got competitive funding for grants. We have a proof of concept. We've got an SBDC, Small Business Development Corporation. We've got an accelerator. We have weekly webinars, founder talks, SBIR, STTR talks, corporate partnerships, venture capitalist talks, venture angel talks, and so forth. And of course, like Damon and Wisconsin, Milwaukee, at least we at the University of California have quarterly national ICOR customer discovery validation training, of which the best of the best graduates have an opportunity then to participate in a national cohort somewhere around the country. And we have the Blackstone Launchpad program powered by Techstars Network, which concentrates on student entrepreneurs and so forth. And even if they don't end up being entrepreneurs, it enables them to be much more successful and more adept at being intrapreneurs within whatever company they work. And I'd mentioned international relations. I mentioned our annual SBIR STTR conference. We've got additional accelerators, Clean Energy Accelerator, where we're collaborating with the University of San Diego and Cal State San Marcos and so forth, funded by the Federal Economic Development Administration. So all of these programs in concert or in part are a way to train, but as I think Damon had indicated, the proof is in the pudding. You just simply need to roll up the sleeves, build a team, typically what I do at least 65% of the time, and go out there and get dirty.
Yeah, I'm prepared to violently agree with both of these gentlemen. But what I'd like to do also is amplify something that Martin said. You had mentioned sort of role models, successful entrepreneurs. I mean, I'm a huge believer in experiential learning and mentors, et cetera, and role models. And in particular for something that's perhaps counterintuitive, a way that they can help new entrepreneurs in significant ways beyond what you might appreciate. In Silicon Valley, we always talk about OPM. How do you start a company? OPM, other people's money. Mm-hmm. But money is a non-differential resource. You can get that almost anywhere from almost anybody. The OPM that's really powerful is other people's mistakes. When you have an entrepreneur who's done it, been down that path, can tell these people, yeah, intuitively you want to go left, but in actuality you want to go right, or those kinds of things are incredibly powerful. Obviating mistakes for these kinds of entrepreneurs, both in terms of conserving capital, conserving momentum, and just sort of culturally, spiritually within the organizations can be incredibly valuable. So I definitely want to amplify that.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that insight. And I love the intention of that entrepreneur. So growing growing entrepreneurs within your organization. I mean, even the Air Force, we have our chief entrepreneur who helps cultivate entrepreneurs outside of our to go on, from our Air Force Research Laboratory, and we've seen success from that program. So that's definitely a beneficial and having that mentorship, along the way, so you don't have to repeat those mistakes that other entrepreneurs have made. So that's key. Thank you, Damon, Todd, and Martin for sharing that insight. So I know you've seen the Air Force has really kind of flipped the Air Force Ciber Sitter program, and we're putting out open topics to where we're now saying, hey, you tell us how you can help us solve our problems. And so that means that we're showing that we're interested in expanding our network of STTR contracts to new partners. What kind of funding mechanisms have been successful for your organizations in that area?
For
So
bring,
I
I'm
mean,
sorry,
oh, go
for
ahead,
bringing
Todd.
companies into the Air Force Cyber, is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, Air Force Ciber Sitter or other funding mechanisms that you've had. I know there's venture capitalists, there's other funding mechanisms that you have, but are you doing anything to leverage the STTR award wins and aligning them to other funding mechanisms, or are there other areas that you guys kind of touch on to help entrepreneurs with that funding gaps that they may have?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I-
so
I can. Oh.
No, you first, Todd, and
yeah.
Roll,
So
I'll
roll.
come in. I'll come in number 3.
yeah. Again, with really our strongest program that we have is the matching grant that I mentioned earlier. It's so this is really intended to fill in that gap, not only from a scientific to a commercial gap that we try to have people help out, but also from funding from phase 1 and phase 2 to help them go beyond just getting out of the cyber mechanism. The goal of our matching grant really is commercialization, and if they can use well, let me back up here. So we also have the matching grant available for phase 2 companies who have phase 2 cybers on board, and our focus, our programming on that is really to have people talk to and learn from investors, angel funds, venture capital. And so we bring those people into our program to talk with our clients who have these grants or have these matching grants available, with the goal of, guess what? You can't live off of government money all the time, and you do need to be commercializing your technology. And oftentimes, though you may want to bootstrap and not bring on investors, likelihood you're going to have to. So this is where we try to train them in going through the process and talking to these investors early to try to learn the process, so they can, when they get serious about trying to get investors, they've been practiced, and it makes it easier for them to find the funds.
Thank you. Damon, did you want to touch on that a bit?
Yeah, I tend to view things sort of holistically. There are a couple of areas that, sort of generally speaking, startups benefit, and it varies wildly depending on their industry. But sort of front end, either however you want to characterize it, skunkworks-esque kind of money to get people beyond ideation to see if there's any there, or curated angel kinds of funding. But the other large gap is, what people typically refer to as the sort of valley of death. And again, depending on your industry or technology, getting you from TRL 2, 3, 4-ish to actual commercialization, where you've hit the point of diminishing returns for capital, and your risk profile is starting to look like a hockey stick, but it's not the kind of hockey stick you want. So, I think those are the two areas where, generally speaking, startup companies benefit from injections of capital. But what I try and stay away from is point solutions to point problems. Again, going back to that holistic notion, if I have a cohort of, whatever, biotech companies, what I try and do is establish line of sight from whatever the angel funding is, all the way through to whatever that exit is, that commercialization event, whether it's an IPO or it's a FCS, the first customer ship of a product. Lay the groundwork so that they're not constantly in reactive mode. Okay, I move the rock, now what do I do? Oh, I move the rock again, now what do I want to do? Give people line of sight and lay the groundwork for funding all the way through. And of course, some of these companies are going to pivot. Some of these companies aren't going to make it. But the latency and the impedance mismatch between ending a funding event and getting a new one is really detrimental to progress for companies. So when I approach it, I found that to be the most useful thing, giving them line of sight into the sort of ecosystem of capital that's going to get them from where they are to where they need to be versus just point solutions injecting capital in certain areas.
And then to follow on Todd and Damon, in addition to SBIR, STTR, there is also precursor funding. For example, the National Science Foundation has something called PFI Partnerships for Innovation and so forth. For those who are not necessarily ready for prime time SBIR, a PFI is a terrific way to go. We also set great store by corporate relationships and corporate partnerships. And here at the University of California, we have a team expressly focused on the development of corporate relationships, not just simply offering them the capacity of university researchers to work in concert with them hand in glove to solve their problems. But as I'd indicated earlier, if I need to fortify a team's credentials and credibility for an SBIR or angel funding, we may identify a company somewhere that may be a strategic fit prospectively, maybe for a licensing arrangement sometime down the road, or perhaps an M&A or corporate acquisition, something like that. In addition to that, we are closely in touch with angel funds throughout the state and nationwide. In our neck of the woods, we've got the Tech Coast Angels, and I've got a team going through due diligence as we speak with the Life Science Angels up in Palo Alto. There's the Co-Fund. There are loads of others. So both venture capital and angel funding, very tight relationship with. We also maintain touch with foundations. And also, by the way, there's a sub-arm of that, or maybe an adjacent arm called venture philanthropy. Which means with some of them, LLS, leukemia, lymphoma comes to mind, Michael J. Fox, Parkinson, and so forth, where some of those foundations have a venture philanthropy arm where they'll actually take a small equity stake in the venture if it makes a strategic fit for them. And then there are, of course, other funds. Out here, we have CalSeed. We've got regional innovation grants funded by the Economic Development. We've got Caltech's Rocket Fund. And so we try to turn up whatever rock is there and see if there's any money underneath it. But again, the bottom line is that none of this is really realistically available unless they are properly trained and properly supported by people just like Todd and his team, and Damon and his team, and then mine as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. I mean, just a wealth of information and knowledge that you shared. I wanted to open it up to our audience to see if they had any questions. I'm sure they may have some biting questions for you. I think one question that I saw here is, do you have any advice or resources that you feel like they should really check out first? What's that one thing that our entrepreneurs out there should really check out? Resource.
Yeah, well, I think doing a fair amount of legwork with all the different organizations that might be available to them. So within our state itself, within Wisconsin, we have several partners that we work with. So there's the Law and Entrepreneurship Clinic here in Madison. There are the SBDCs that are available. We have Wisconsin Tech Council. We have WEDC, which is primarily where we get a lot of our own funding from. So I think getting into the network of all these different organizations that are available is a great way to start, because then it basically just builds on itself. you get a critical mass of people that you've talked to, and then they'll say, oh, by the way, have you talked to this person or talked to this group? And then it really starts to build, and you can really learn about the business that you need to do before you are going down a path that might not be successful. So I think networking early and often is one of the better things that our clients can do in order to be commercially successful.
And I'd like to follow up with that, obviously the first step is to, wherever you are, we have Texas A&M here, we've got UW, Madison, and you've got the University of California here, but it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest for those of you in the Ohio area that the University of Dayton, for example, probably has similar programs, Ohio State University. So wherever you are, reach out to your university, which has tech transfer, which has commercialization and innovation divisions, which has, for example, what we have, technology partnership and so forth. But in addition to that, just key in agencies, National Institute of Health and Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, U.S. Department of Agriculture, whatever is of interest to you, just simply do a general Google type search on those agencies and SBIR. And read the wealth of information that they have, or key in sbir.gov or anything like that. Get on grants.gov and just roll up your sleeves and go through it. There is just a wealth of information there. That would probably be a great start. But I think the easiest way is, frankly, to reach out to Texas A&M or Wisconsin, University of California, or wherever you are located. Many of the research universities, if not most of them, have programs just like what the three of us have been discussing with you today.
Yeah,
I would have said just call Martin, but my second choice would have been networks are key. Clearly, that would be leveraging other people's connections. But a resource a lot of people forget until later on is the actual marketplace. I hate to keep harping on this market connection piece, but if you have a widget, go to widget conferences, find out what's selling, what's not selling. Be a pretend buyer. Gee, if your widget is blue and all the other widgets are red, talk to someone and say, gee, do you have a blue widget? And talk to the people on the floor. Would you buy a blue widget? I mean, that's a phenomenal resource, and it can be done very cheaply. And these kinds of either professional organizations or industry events, or maybe it's a technology event that you want to attend, it's a concentrated resource. Early days, entrepreneurs are looking for leverage. That's an extremely cost-effective and time-effective way to get a broad read on the marketplace proper.
Really a terrific idea.
Having said, if I may, Martin, just before. Before you spill the secret sauce, make sure that you've connected with an attorney and you've protected all that needs to be protected. I actually teach a course in this, or a segment in this, is sort of the non-enabling disclosure. Make sure you're practiced in that. Because when I'm on the other side of the table, the easiest way to get an inventor to spill the beans is resonate. Oh, and they'll just keep going. So a little bit of discipline is involved before you do this, but it's a phenomenal resource and one that's very, very cost effective and time effective.
I feel like we could talk all day, and I cut you guys off, but our time
you have to stop us. Okay,
is up. And just again, thank you so much for being here today. Todd, Damon, and Martin, you just provided a wealth of information, and I'm sure we'll have you back again, and we'll continue to connect and keep those resources flowing. So thank you again, and just glad to have you here.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Happy to do this more.
Yep. You bet. We probably could have done 45 hours instead of 45 minutes. So
I think we could have talked all day. So
especially with this mouth here. So anyway, I hope it was helpful. And Damon and Todd, it was equally a pleasure to have met you.
Yeah. Thanks
so much, Anissa, and thanks so much to Kathleen Gilpin with Air Force. She was so kind in joining us at our conference. 4 o'clock in the morning, she was in Tokyo, but she got up, coffee in hand bathrobe and actually gave a talk. Kidding about the bathrobe, of course. Gave a talk at 4 and then had 2 hours of meetings thereafter. So she's my hero. So if
All
you
right.
as with Kathleen Gilpin, just give her a head rub for me.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good
Thank you.
day.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye for now.
Take care.
Stay safe.